Today I'm blessed to be joined with three of my best friends. Some of our friendships go back over a decade. We had a guy's retirement ceremony yesterday, so guys coming in from Virginia and Florida and Washington, and I'm just truly happy to have you guys here. Let's go around the room and introduce yourself for the listeners, and we'll start with you, Pete.
Yeah, I'm Pete Turbide. Don and I have been friends for the past 12 years or so. We met through the Navy, stationed together here in San Diego for a time, and just happy to be here.
Gideon Dungy. I've been in the Navy for 24 years, been in the program for about 15 years, and super stoked to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, James Summers, retired Navy, 20 years. Was in the program about 10 years, met Don in 2008, so we've known each other quite a while.
Yeah, I think we have pretty colorful history with all of us. You know, some of you guys being my boss, some of you checking in the very first day and looking for help and guidance and being told to go figure it out. And then, you know, one of my biggest mentors helping me out as a really junior guy, just kind of trying to figure out what to do as an adult. It's been pretty cool, and I think that we have a really, really awesome circle of friends going on. So,
and a lot of them were here. They're in town this week, so it was awesome to see everybody.
Yeah, definitely. One of the biggest things, and I think kind of greatest stories that a lot of the listeners can get from this conversation is when you're transitioning out of the military and kind of what that life looks like and setting yourself up. And as one of you have just recently retired and kind of went through the ringer of moving back home and dozens of interviews and things like that. Jimmy, you want to talk about kind of your career and some of the stuff that led to where you're at now?
Okay, yeah. I was a cryptologist obviously for 20 years, so a lot of technical schools and IT-related things going on there. Been very hands-on type person, maintenance-wise, as far as, you know, learning equipment and things like that. So always been kind of a very technical person and savvy on computers. So my thought getting out was that I would go into some sort of tech industry type thing. And in the Navy, you know, as you transition, you go through this kind of two-week course basically to send you out to the world. And so at that time there was this thing started up called the Honor Foundation, and we ended up paying into it and giving it, you know, it's like a 4-month training on, you know, what it is out in the world. You know, you're learning C-suite and you know, how to interview and how to wear a suit and, you know, just all these things that we don't necessarily do in the military and people out in, you know, civilian world are doing all the time. So it was very valuable in that respect, and it helped you realize to some extent what type of person you were. You go over like your personality traits and helps you open up like your thought processes into what makes you tick and what maybe you should pursue. I don't think I really necessarily got it right out of the gate. You know, I don't really, maybe nobody really does right out of the gate, but I like, you know, serving the community and like I said, it was a technical person. So I did that, got out, thought I was planned and I had it all figured out, and I was going to be up in Seattle. So my whole reasoning really for getting out was that I was going to go back to family. I did 20 years, not a day more, and I'm going back up. I'm going to be next to my grandfather and my parents, and my wife and I are from the same hometown, so we're going back to family. It's a big deal. And then I started looking for jobs, and I'm like, you know, 50 applications in. I've only got like a few interviews, and you know, and now we're out, and I'm living with my in-laws. Don't have a job. I'm like, this sucks.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I imagine that trying to think about that process right now. I'm just under 15 years and already starting to plan for what the next 5 years look like and how to better position myself for getting out. I can only imagine my mindset going into it is like, yeah, I'm going to be okay. You know, I know generally what I want to do. I've built some good relationships. I have good technical expertise. I have degrees. I have, you know, things
Right.
like that. And it was kind of shocking to hear your side of the story of you're like, yep, I got a master's degree.
Yep.
Here I am, technically proficient and all that stuff. And then you got the whole military help, or so you thought going into those positions.
I thought I was pretty well prepared. You know, I had, like you said, I had my master's degree under my belt. I had PMP. I got certified project management professional, and you know, so I thought, you know, I was well prepared. And I don't think that I wasn't. It just wasn't. It wasn't the right place. Like, if I could probably go anywhere in the country and get a great job, you know, whatever, you know, over $100,000 somewhere, right? And I've seen those come in, actually, being even in Washington now. But I chose to go home, and so I limited my movement, so to speak, or my ability to get anything that was not a, what do you want to say, a high level, a management type position.
Sure.
Right? So
do you think, looking back on it, your biggest priority was moving home and really kind of pigeonholing yourself into that one geographical location? If you went back and had to go through the process again, do you think that you would make those same moves or those same decisions?
So if you had asked me that probably 4 weeks ago, I'd have probably said I'm not going to get it. I wouldn't have got out. I would have just stuck around, because I'm starting from the bottom. You know, you're starting from the bottom again. It's the death of a career. You're moving into a new career. And so if you can't set yourself up and get into a company, like maybe you have an aunt, you know some people that work there, you know, and get set up that way to where you're starting in that maybe mid-level area. If you don't have that already, I would probably just stay around. But in the 2.5 years now, I got a job. Actually, my first job. Well, let's rewind a little bit. So I got out. I went through all these things with the different companies, like, you know, T-Mobile. I'm not going to name all of them, but T-Mobile was a big one. I got several interviews with them and didn't land a job. So I went through that whole thing like, oh no, I can't find a job. I'm gonna try to buy a job. I'm gonna start a business. I'm you know, considered this jack of all trades. I can do all kinds of stuff, right? And that's great for running a business. So let's look at businesses. So I looked at like a distillery. I looked at, you know, a furniture making company, a bar. I mean, I was all over the board, but they were all in my hometown. These are all really good businesses, really, but well, I won't say it. They're really cool businesses to me, but when I looked at them, there was still something underlying in the, like, to buy into them, because, yeah, you know, you're purchasing a business, they're selling it, right?
Right.
So looking into them, just something didn't feel right about them, like, you know, whatever they were doing with their assets and this and that, you know.
Well, they were probably selling for a reason, not necessarily because they were ready to retire or ready to hand it off, but more of because, like, this has just been a headache for too long, and I made some mistakes, and they're kind of hard to recover.
Right. So I didn't end up doing that. I ended up, really, I was going to start my own business from scratch. And, you know, so you're starting from scratch. What do you got to do? You got to build a website. You got to, you know, get your equipment, get your location. Those are all, you know, pretty important things. And here I am living with my brother and sister-in-law, you know, so I don't have a house. I don't have a shop. But I did it anyway. I rolled into my parents' shop. I reconfigured my mom's. It was a pig barn, really, at the time. So I imagine that, man. I'm cleaning up stalls of crap, literally, you know. And so I got it all set up and all cleared out. And I bought a 4x8 CNC table, and I'm going full speed ahead. And I just got offered a job. Like 4 months after I applied for the job, here comes the job. I'm like, well, what do you do? I got to feed my family, and I really don't like living with my in-laws, so I guess I better take the job and you know, roll into real life, I guess, so to speak. And it was a management job. It was actually a really good job, great job, very grateful for it. It got me into my house, and, you know, all that sort of thing. It was just long hours, 12 to 19 hours, depending on what's going on, right, and every day. And you're running 22 guys that don't want to necessarily be there. It's a union job, so you got to deal with all the union things and this and that. And so, yeah.
So to kind of rewind on that conversation, I think, it's important to point out a couple things of being the sole provider for your family. It's got to be scary to think about, okay, I've provided for my family day in and day out for 20 years. And their livelihood depends on my ability to bring in a paycheck and pay for our house. And like you said, you're living with your brother and sister.
Yeah.
And now you're like, oh, I'm burdening them, even though they welcomed you in with open arms, stay as long as you need, get out on your feet, all that
absolutely,
stuff.
Yeah.
But it's that internal thing as a man. I need to get out of this situation. I need to, I'm not a bum. I work hard. I'm intelligent. I have all this stuff.
Yep.
So that part has got to be tough.
Yeah.
And then another piece that you pointed out is, the fact that you're coming in on the bottom and it sucks. And you worked yourself up to a very high level in the military and you were dealing with a lot of things. You were in a special program and
right. Well,
excuse me.
We are handed things that are pretty important to national security and all these. I mean, it's really high level stuff. Some of this, right, and people and lives, and it's just like this huge amount of responsibility. And then you roll into civilian world, and they don't consider that they don't. You're just a military person, right?
Yeah, it doesn't really translate.
It doesn't
to them
translate
on
well.
the same level.
Yep.
The responsibility that you had, it doesn't translate at all to the civilian sector.
And so that's one of the things in transition they're teaching you is like how to roll some of those stories that you have, that you can tell, the ones that you can tell, because they're not classified or whatever, and you could roll them into this story that means something to a civilian company. It's really hard. I mean, you really got to sit down and think about those things and write examples, and those stories got to be in your head for interview time.
Does your team pick up on those things?
Sometimes I think it depends on who you're actually talking to, because HR is kind of a weird. It's kind of I don't know, how do you explain it? Because they have now, you go through the process, like computers are doing a lot of the picking. Like you meet this checkbox for your whatever degree or whatever the criteria is for the job, right? And then so you'll get to that part, and then the next part is like a video interview, or it might even be a phone call interview, right? And then this is all before the sit down, right? So you got all this thing, and then maybe the sit down comes. So there's like 3 or 4 little steps here where you're not even close to the job yet, and you got to make it through all those steps for So you have to have your stories right, and an example for this and that, and
like going back to the Honor Foundation, was that? Because the way I've heard of it is more like a self-discovery process versus,
right.
Hey, I'm going to get a job out of here. Do you feel like you got anything out of the Honor Foundation? I mean,
well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, what type of person I was, like the personality testing was it was eye-opening, but not like I understand. I'm a performer. Like I want to be top dog. In some respects, I'm competitive, right? So you're like, okay, that makes sense, right? But being a people person, I can't remember actually all the traits that I have, but it's I'm a compassionate person. I care. Like if somebody's not being included, I like that. That's an includer. So it's like those things, right? And why am I like that? Or you dig into some of those things, right? And then what does that mean in your employment, right? So I said 2 years ago or 6 months ago or whatever, because I found this thing recently with wrestling. I've always loved wrestling. I was really good at it in high school and into all Navy or whatever. But coaching kids, man, it's just awesome. It really is it's super fun. It's rewarding. You're seeing it. You're seeing the kids grow and seeing the excitement on their faces, and they come into something that's like new. They've never done it, and so they're trying something. And then to see them, excited about the results. Like getting a win or, doing a cartwheel.
Are you rolling up a lot of those military lessons into life lessons for the kids?
Right. Yeah. So, just grit, determination, those sorts of things, never giving up, all these little things that you kind of inherently do in the military, not because you're told to do it. It's just like something you have, and you know, it just, I guess that actually really is where that has come from with me. For me, is wrestling, because I was a runt really when I was in high school. I was 82 pounds, and
Coach Summers.
yeah. So I can tell that whole story too, but we can go back into the transition stuff here, keeping it back towards that. It just, like I said, you learn a little bit about yourself, and maybe you get lucky in a role right off the bat, or maybe you learn it 2.5 years down the road, you know? So,
and one of the most important things to point out in this whole topic is it's not necessarily being at the bottom rung that you have the problem with. It's the lack of kind of ability to be recognized for the skills that you do have.
Yeah.
And being in those civilian positions of saying, nope, this bottom rung job, they only do this. Don't really care what you as a person know or can provide and all this stuff. And then you have to check these boxes, be at the company for this long. If you recognize a job that's better for you, probably still not you, because this guy has 10 years at the business. You have 2 years or 6 months, whatever, and you know, pay your dues, and then we'll talk about that.
Yeah, a few of those interviews were exactly that feeling. Like, you going into you could have all the stories I was talking about. You could be as prepared as you can be, and the interview goes awesome. But as soon as you get in there and they start asking some questions, and you got the great answer, but then they start asking another question, you're like, wait a minute, this kind of feels like it's going a different direction here. Like, they already have somebody in mind. You know, they're just trying to maybe stumble you up on one or two so that they can pick this other person that's already in the company that they know and, you know, their best buds with.
I think a lot of it too is like what Pete said. Like, sometimes, like, what you do in the military doesn't translate easily. Like, yeah, you need to be prepared to be able to, you know, articulate that.
Yeah.
But,
oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Were you scared?
No, actually, I wasn't scared. I was excited to get out and go back to family.
Do something new.
Right, do something new, right? And I went a totally different direction. I mean, I could have probably stayed in our field, right, and done some contract work or something like that, right? But I just totally went a different direction, because I make things as difficult as possible, right? So that's what I do. And so I did this thing, and it's ended up where it's ended up now, which is cool, but it really was not easy.
What would you say is the most important trait to have, or I guess mindset, going into that transition process?
Oh, wow.
Like, to me, it's
just trying to stay positive, you know, because it's one of those things where you're going to get rejected over and over and over, and you're going to eat a lot of crow, man.
Yeah. And I was going to say patience. Like, it's not going to come right away. Well, like, people don't owe you anything. Like, they don't owe you shit.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's actually a great point. I mean, yeah, I did these cool things in the military, and I got to this high level, but they don't know any of those cool things, and that high level doesn't mean anything to them. You're just another person right off the street, and you, I guess, so to speak, have to earn it like anybody else. Like you're saying, maybe you were in the company and you've earned it, but they don't know those things, right? And you're just another person. So, you know, you just got to hang in there. And
is the day-to-day at the job significantly different? And where I'm going with this is, every decision that we make in the military, especially in our program, is to make immediate, impactful results on the battlefield, and to, you know, stay the most lethal force in the world with all the technology and the training and everything that we do. And so the decisions you make on a daily basis, you're dealing with taxpayer dollars, you're dealing with lives.
Yeah.
You're dealing with people's careers. You're dealing with their families and everything that goes into that whole package that we worry about daily in the military. And then I imagine it's got to be hard when you go to corporate business X, and they don't necessarily care about your family. They don't necessarily care about your life. They don't really care about anything other than like this one decision and kind of stepping through the process.
Right. Probably the best example for that was my first job at Alcoa, an aluminum refinery. And that is one of those, you know, you got a piece of equipment down, that's got to be back up for them to make any money. And that's where I was in the cast house, which is, that's their big money maker. You know, it's billet aluminum. And if that piece of equipment is down, then we're not making hardly any money. They're making money off other stuff, don't get me wrong, but that's like the big thing. So there's a lot of pressure to keep that thing moving. And it's a 24/7 kind of deal, and you're working with the union, so union maintenance guys, and it's a huge challenge. And you're right. You think the company doesn't really care about the families, but I think they do. As your man, I'm their manager, right? So I do care about them. I care about their families, but I also have this obligation with a company, right? That, we got to make money, otherwise nobody gets a paycheck, right? So, and if there's no collaboration between you and your people, then they're never going to want to do anything for you. You got to, so to some extent, you're going to have to care for them, right?
Sure. Well, I think that's more of your particular management style rather than the overall company policy.
I can see
think
that. Yeah,
one of the biggest things that we deal with in the military are things like PERS tempo, meaning how many days are you away training versus how many days do you have, with your head on your pillow in your house,
right?
Or the initiative they call preservation of the force, where you have 3-day weekends and family events and all this stuff. Are those sort of programs integrated into from what your experience is, into civilian jobs?
Yeah, so they have and really it's related to safety, right? Because if you got a guy that's working his second shift, you got to make sure that he's, energized enough to make it through the shift without, losing a limb or something like that, right? And it's that serious. Like you'll see that in a refinery, right?
So do you do like team building shit, like we do, like every Friday is Monster Mash, or?
No, it's so that relationship with the union is a little different. I mean, you can do some some stuff, but it's more like I'll buy you guys pizza,
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
And just for clarification for the non-military listeners, we're kind of gluttons for punishment, and so what we generally articulate as a team building event is going to beat ourselves physically in a gnarly workout together, because the whole mindset is those who suffer together grow closer. And so we'll swim 2 miles, run 6 miles, do a bunch of pull-ups, and then at the end of it there's a keg. And then we joke about how terrible that was, or
who beat who,
how slow Don was on the run, and
how slow Jimmy was on the swim. Yeah.
Hey, we balance each other out, You and me, we make a decent one person.
Yeah.
I remember when you came back from that one deployment, you were like, you got huge, right? Because you couldn't go into the compound, was so small. And you're like, dude, I'll bench whatever, but like, don't ask me to run to the back gate.
Yeah.
It was really like the back fence.
Yeah.
The back gate's like 3 miles away.
compound
I was more talking about 100 yards away.
Yeah, but there's no real, at least not at that job there wasn't. I mean, my current job, we'll go out and have a drink or something, and talk about the day or whatever. But in the union thing, especially, I was a supervisor, and I'm non-union salary, and they're hourly. So there's a line there. So so basically, it's you buying pizza or something something like that. We maybe cooking breakfast in the morning or something, right?
Oh, okay.
So there's things like that, but it's nothing like the military, man. You'll never see that again. I think I said it in my retirement. The brotherhood that you have in the group that we have, you're not going to see that anywhere else. That's not what I've seen anyway.
I think we have a unique kind of opportunity here with Gideon. You're looking at 2.5 years before you're hitting retirement, and Jimmy, you're 2.5 years out of retirement.
Right.
What are 3 main pieces of advice that you have for Gideon or anybody who's
right.
Yep, I got 2 years left, this is what I need to start doing?
Yeah.
What are 3 main things that you would tell Gideon or anybody else?
I kind of went up and down about having a degree, right? Because it's a huge commitment, and what I have seen in leadership, like in the leadership chain, is that some of those guys don't have a degree and some do, but I think you're considered more so for a higher position if you have that degree. So if there's a chance to do something like that, then yes. But I'm not saying
that's not happening.
I'm not saying it's a killer, right? But the other thing is project management professional. I'm like, I busted for that, but I really didn't get a job for that, right? So I spent a lot of time and energy getting that thing, and I haven't really used it. So I've had the question about certifications and this and that, right? Like which, should I get certifications? And I would say yes. It depends on what road you want to go down, right? Like if you want to be an IT guy, you probably need some IT certs, right? I'm just got lucky with where I'm at. And a lot of stuff I do is non-corporate IT. It's all CCTVs and enterprise Wi-Fi and a couple of little servers here and there. Nothing to where like you have to have this huge certification to do.
But right? I think you're right. I think it's where you make a decision to go. Like, what do you think you want to do?
Right.
Afterwards is what.
And then you end up in a totally different direction once you get out anyway. So it's you can, but it's just the fact I think that you're preparing. You're trying to prepare yourself, right? You want to feel good about it, and I think actually that's what rolls into the kids. Like when we just had our first dual meet, we did really well, but my whole thing getting them there was we're going to put in the work so that you feel good about that first event because they've never had a match, they don't know what it's like, but it's that prep to get there. So you're going to work harder than any other person or any other team, and you're going to put in the work that's needed, and you're going to be ready. And I think that's really that's where it turned for them. It's like, oh, okay, we have to work hard, and they're like, hey man, can we do more of this or more of that, or and they're more interested in like, oh, I like this move, but what's the little thing that I need to do here to make it work even better? So
yeah, and I think that's a good point. Like that comes down to humility, right?
Yeah.
Hey, I don't know. I don't control what other people are doing or not doing. All I can control is how much I prepare
exactly
for this match, right? So I'm going to be. I may not be the smartest person. I may not have a degree. I may not have all the certifications I need for whatever. But I'm going to be working harder than anybody around me.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And eventually it pays off, right? I don't know. We'll see. But so far it is.
Yeah, I think when you were talking about the hiring process and how a lot of it is not the personal, or I'm sorry, the HR professional that's picking it, but a computer-based system. And what you're really trying to do is stack as many checked boxes over into your column, so that really you have that range to be able to kind of select. Because if you don't have that degree, then all the ones that say degree required, you're already
not eligible.
Not eligible.
Exactly. So now here's the other part of that though, is networking. And that was a big thing from the Honor Foundation as well, right? Your 50 cups of coffee and this and that, where you go and sit down with somebody that you don't necessarily know, and you're trying to network them and see what they're doing out in the community. Maybe they can offer something or maybe not. It's just meeting somebody that maybe you can help later down the road, whether it's for you or for your friend or whoever, right? You're just networking. So that is how I got my first job, because really my stepdad works there. So I had a network in the business, right? And so he was able to push me towards that job, and obviously a great reference. And so that's really how I got my first job. It wasn't that I beat the computers. It wasn't, that I had a master's degree or any of that stuff. It was that I knew somebody in the company. And it actually is what happened at BP a little bit too, right? So
I think that's a huge thing, is that networking piece, and not in the kind of thing that we see all the time, right? In the contractors who kind of contribute, to our thing. So going back to talking on the networking piece, like we see it a lot of in our industry, right? Our own guys who get out, or guys coming, tangentially from similar communities, they're networking. It's very, greasy. It's very sleazy, and that's kind of a hard balance to maintain when you're getting out. You now work for one of the companies that provides us some like contract training or something like that, and they're asking for favors, and it's just really, obviously there's an ethical piece to it.
Yeah.
So do you see that a lot in like the civilian sector? Or maybe even just between the unions and
right,
what you have to do as a salaried worker?
No, I mean, you got to think with the government contract and all that sort of thing, you're going to see some different criteria in your networking. Sometimes you'll have to have a delay before you can actually be involved in something after you retire, right? Things like that. Networking, I would think out in the civilian world is kind of I don't know, the more the better,
I think
the more hooks you have out there, the better. But
to kind of touch on your point, in my side business, selling promotional products, one of the things I hate most about it is trying to sell shit to your friends.
yeah,
I don't want to be that sleazeball that's trying to make a buck on my friends. It's more of, I try to take the approach of, hey man, you're going to buy shirts. You're going to put your logo on it. You're going to put your command, all that stuff. You're going to buy them anyways.
yeah,
I can at least do my best to get you a good deal and provide a good service to you for the stuff that you want. But at the same time, it's like anytime people are trying to buy swag and be like, hey, dude, I got a company. Do you want to buy from me? It just kind of feels sleazy sometimes.
Yeah, but I think the most important thing, like for someone who, like in your position, who has a side business or whatever, like what sucks and what doesn't suck, right?
Definitely. And
that's a big deal.
And that's the approach that I try to take is I know exactly what it is you're talking about, the budget that you're constrained to, or the discussions and how you have to go to a committee to get everybody to vote on this.
Or even just how something looks.
Exactly. And so, I'm blessed to have a designer in-house. I'm blessed to have the connections that I have with my aunt helping me run the business and educating me on all of the pieces that go into ordering or making relationships with vendors and things like that. But at the end of the day, sometimes it's still selling shit to your friends,
Right.
and that's the part that sucks.
But I think that the point there too is that you have a little network. You have a network already, and if somebody needs something, you have the network needed to make it happen.
Well, that's kind of how it started. So with what we were doing in the past, it was, hey, let's buy some hats, let's buy some shirts, let's buy some coins, all of this stuff. And I would go to my aunt and say, hey, here's all the artwork that Holly did, or hey, can you make these shirts? She's like, well, I have to go to a designer. I'll just hire your wife to design, blah, blah, blah. And then after a while, she's like, why don't you just do this?
Yeah,
And I'm like, well, I don't know how. She's like, well, that's a stupid excuse.
yeah,
I'll teach you. I'll sit down and I have questions all the time. So I call her and she helps me out. She walks me through how to write the PO and how to contact this vendor or industry expectations, pricing, things like that. So to touch on your point, yeah, without the network, I would have never even started the business. And then having that network definitely helps continue the business.
and but that's a point too, is being able to ask the questions like, oh, I am interested in this, and you have a lot of information. I need to, drain the information from you by asking all these questions and getting what I need to go forward with something. The other, like you're talking about, we're talking about ethically in the networking, I guess. Some of the things that you might see, like on LinkedIn, you're going to see some business development type stuff. They're always trying to hit you up and, hey, can I be your buddy? And then you link with them, and then all of a sudden you get this slew of texts from them about some product they have. And you're not even remotely interested, but you're going to start seeing that, right? And I think that's part of the networking. Like you can kind of, you can whatever, unlink them or.
I mean, in my current position, I get hit up all the time from people we've all known, even somebody that didn't necessarily do our job, but was in a position to provide us some type of product or capability or something like that. And it's really hard, at least for me, to like tell them to go fuck themselves.
Yeah.
Right? Or what I do is I really just tell them, hey, you're talking to the wrong dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that's, there's the easy way and the hard way, and you don't always want to just tell people to beat feet, but a lot of times it's like, hey, man, like this, there is a right way to do this.
Yeah.
This isn't it. Go here, and
Right.
a lot of times you can help them, which helps you. You're building that network. You're a touch point. Which helps you when you get out and you're going to work in a similar industry. And hey, I know a guy over at Company X or Company B, whatever it is, and I did them a solid by putting them ethically in the right direction. And now I have that resource in my network.
Well, you have a
Right.
clear conscience too.
Yeah.
Most importantly,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Exactly.
But I'm scared shitless, like that transition thing, retirement and then getting out, especially on top of all the family stuff. Like I am fucking scared.
So find a real job.
So to go back to it, what were the three things that you have for getting, the three pieces of advice for somebody getting out?
Well, number one is just do the best you can to prepare, right? Build your network. That'd be number two. And we talked about finding those things, those stories to present in an interview. And they are somewhat perishable, as I've learned. You get an interview, you hit it, and then you get another interview like, oh, I think I'm good on those stories. And then they ask the question and you fumble it. And you're like, what was this other detail I had in the story? Oh, no, you forget it, and then the interview's over. So it's just staying fresh with them and, like, coming up.
Did you practice those in the Honor Foundation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll interview a few times if you go through something like that. I mean, or just practice it in the mirror, whatever, with, another coworker, whatever, person in the military, whatever. But, practice it with somebody,
Yeah.
Or give us a call. We can do a phone interview or something.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, there you go. You got your network.
yeah. So, yeah. But, yeah, that's the thing.
I don't think anybody can help me at this point.
Oh no. But yeah, it's the stories, right? So and we have all got them. We got something we did because we're go-getters, but you'll have those stories and then you'll have your network and hopefully something works out, right?
And I think some really important things to add on to that, and obviously I haven't transitioned from the military. I don't know this, but I do know it's important to understand your worth and what you do know.
Yeah.
Because, and Jimmy, you and I have talked about this quite a bit, but you did 20 years of things.
Yeah.
Or in Gideon's case, yeah, sorry, 26 years, and you have so much experience in all of these things, and a lot of it is figuring it out. You have experience in figuring it out. You have experience in leading people and all of these things. So for you to kind of go to a company hat in hand and say, please, can I please have a job?
Right.
Like, that's not quite really showing what you have. And when you go in, you're asking for salary. In the military, we're kind of conditioned to like, well, I'll just ask for second best because I know best isn't going to work, and I don't want third best. So I'll just go straight in at that second best. Companies are only going to pay you, or they're going to pay you as little as they possibly can. So if you want a job for 180, don't go in asking for 160.
Right.
Like, if you want 180, go ask for 190.
Yeah, they're just going to say no. And they'll offer you, they'll be a counter offer usually. I can tell you that process too. So with both the bigger jobs I had, you get the job, now it's negotiation time. And that's where, it's knowing your worth or knowing the value of the job, because you won't necessarily, they won't post what the salary is for the job. Not necessarily. What I did is you go through Glassdoor and you kind of gauge through Glassdoor. It's an app, right? And you can look up the job. You can look up the company or the job, similar jobs, and try to get an estimated value of salary, right? So that's kind of your baseline. Okay. And if you didn't have that before you started that, interview process, then you're probably, you're in the wrong space already because, right? So make sure you have a good idea of what salary you like and then what positions you're going to look for. And then when you get to the negotiation, like you're saying, go high. All they're going to do is say no. And if they come back with a counter, then you can go back with another counter. Like, okay, well, you're not gonna bump me to this, but maybe I get a bonus, or maybe I get another week of vacation. Right? That's a whole nother. Like, we get a month of vacation in the military. You don't start with that in civilian income. You start with 2 weeks, right? And so when I did my negotiation, I bumped it to 4 weeks. Right? So I'm like, well, my time in the military, I always had 30 days. I wanted, at least 30 days of vacation, or 4 weeks, right? So I ended up getting that, and then they didn't want to bump to what the salary I had asked for. So I said, well, she came back with something else, and then like, okay, well, but we can offer this bonus too. And so okay, so it was a start, or what do they call it, a hiring bonus. It's a hiring bonus, so it's a one-time thing, right?
Okay.
But at BP, you get a bonus every year. So that was actually on top of the other bonus that I got at the end of the year, or 3 months later or whatever, which wasn't huge, but it was still still cool.
And that wasn't performance based or anything like
It
that.
wasn't huge, but it was also there.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
it existed. I mean,
Right.
even if it was $10, that's $10
Yeah.
you
And
didn't
then
have.
now
you didn't
that-
have before, yeah.
Right, and now that factors into every year because in that is performance based. So it's personal performance as well as the company's performance.
Okay.
And so and BP had a really good year last year, the last like 5 years or whatever. But and each plant has a performance rating. So just I guess that's more information than me. But my point there is performance, and me being me, I'm always trying to figure things out and be forthcoming with everything and try to figure out what's going on, like not being the person with the secret and having all the ducks in a row as far as my employment is concerned, and high effectiveness in what I'm supposed to be doing, right? So I'm above average in the performance ranking, right? So you want to be there too, right? I don't think any of us would have any problems with that sort of thing at any company because we're go-getters or whatever. But
Do you work with any other vets?
at Alcoa, I did. Actually, several vets, and I don't work day to day with any vets, but there are plenty of vets in the company.
I think this is like a perfect segue into like the next topic that we wanted to talk about, and that's grit and hard work and suffering and kind of what that builds in your personality and the way that you carry yourself in this world. Do you notice a difference in the work ethic and the accomplishments of vets versus civilians?
Right. I would say yes and no. I think, well, yes, I think a lot of like at Alcoa is a very hard job because it's, you're constantly getting hammered with having to have something fixed or,
Hard how? Physically or mentally or
both really, because it's long days, you're running around the plant and trying to get people to do stuff and you're trying to make sure everybody's safe. And, so I was constantly moving and then trying to go through and figure out what to do about some piece of equipment that I knew nothing about. Right. So you got to learn all those things. But I think that's us inherently have put up with a lot of stuff. We've been through a lot of, we've gone to austere environments and been able to perform at the highest levels. And we've done the, long days, so it's not really anything new. It's just kind of staying organized and prioritized. And I think that's where some of the military stuff helps as well. But people that are in the company a long time, I don't think you really have a problem with that because they've dealt with it from the very beginning, right? They've gone through these apprenticeship programs or whatnot. So but people that just fall into it and, they don't like it, they're going to leave. So they just go find another job. It's not like us where we're kind of stuck. You have to figure it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's kind of one of the very unique circumstance that we in the military deal with that other companies don't. And of course you can change commands, you can change jobs, you can do things to kind of mitigate the day-to-day bullshit. But at the end of the day, you're stuck with the company. And whatever that commitment is, it's not always 20 years, maybe it's 4 years, whatever the case is. And then, you can move on. But at the end of the day, if you show up to a ship and they're working 12 on, 12 off for 8 months, that's what you're going to do.
Right.
And there's not really a whole lot of alternatives to that for at least that tour.
Yeah. And for us, you do not only your regular job, but you'll have all these other duties, like stand and watch for something or, some other collateral that you'll have to do. So you top that on your regular job. Yeah. Yeah. So, and to some extent, you'll see that in like at BP or wherever, we get involved with like the STEM program or some other little thing just to, be out in the community and do something good. But here the other side of that is somebody that's been in the company a long time and they've vested in the company. They have insurance and all these things that, you need to support your family. Your retirement plan's building. Now you're getting to a point where you're so vested in the company you don't want to leave. So now you really do. That's what I meant about like somebody that's there a while.
So like those kind of guys in your company. I mean, is there a lot of dead weight? Because I mean, we see it in the military, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And guys have been around for like, I mean, they're just taking up a billet, and like, you know, like this guy, right?
Well, I don't know. Maybe it's me thinking I'm like better than people, and I don't necessarily do that. But just like sometimes when you look at somebody, you're saying, "Oh, that person's dead weight." Well, I could probably run circles around that person, right? I think that looking at some of these people all the time, but maybe I couldn't. Maybe the job they have is actually really unique, and I don't know that maybe I could do all their job. But you're right. You looking at somebody you're not going to know, but you sure will think about it. Like, oh man, I could probably run circles around that guy. But yeah, I mean, you're going to see that everywhere, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, like in Hawaii, like, you know, teachers, like teaching is a big deal in Hawaii because it's one of the only, you know, real career paths, you know, for the state. And I don't know what it is. It's like you stay for a certain amount of years and you get tenured.
Yep.
Right? And you cannot get fired. And they may just be like the worst teacher in the world. Like they may hate kids. Like,
so I have no idea what tenured actually means. I mean, I have a general understanding.
Yeah.
But to me, that's that term. Like, oh, this professor's tenured, this teacher's tenured.
I think it's a good analogy. That is the GSs, the government civilians. Once they're off probation, it's kind of like you're tenured, right? So after they've done their 24 months and they're off probation, it takes a lot to get them fired, a lot to get them in trouble. And I think it's the same thing as tenured.
Well, yeah, I just look at it from like a business owner standpoint of being like, why would I ever implement that strategy into my business? Of where, okay, you've been with me long enough, you no longer have to perform, and it's going to be really difficult for me
please
to get rid
be the
of you.
shittiest person at your job.
Right. Well, yeah, I think actually in today's society with all the different lawsuits and all that, there's a lot more protections than just tenure. I mean, it's just like you really have got to document everything. And when I was a salaried employee at Alcoa, I'd have to write stuff in a book, like even conversations. Anything I thought was kind of a weird conversation, I had a notebook. And so you write up that conversation in a notebook because you may have to go back and show HR that.
Oh, yeah, that's crazy.
You know.
Yeah, that's one of the things I advise Holly on a lot whenever she's dealing with what she's dealing with, her employees and things like that, is document it, follow it up with an email, even if it's an email to yourself or whoever, or, hey, just to rehash the conversation we just had in the hallway, this, and this, and that way you can always point back to it. I think one of the really funny things about talking with Holly about what she does in her business and then, you know, just our day-to-day life in the military, leadership is taught from day one. Okay, you're in charge of cleaning the bathrooms. You 4 guys, you're in charge.
I was the iron PO in boot camp.
Yeah, you had the Dirty Dozen with that Master at Arms, and they made a reward out of being in charge of the guys who clean the bathroom. You know, but from day one, you are taught leadership, and the Navy actually does a good job, depending on who your leaders are, in grooming you into taking a lot of responsibility and understanding how to document performance, good and bad, how to reward people, how to punish people, and things like that.
But there's a other side to that, right? And it's kind of something I'm dealing with now, and that's, you know, like you said, from day one, you're taught, hey, step up, do more, lead more, take on more responsibility. And after doing that for 10, 15, 20 more plus years, at what expense, right? Because what the military doesn't teach anybody, or what the mess doesn't teach anybody, is, I wouldn't say balance. I don't believe in work-life balance. I think it ebbs and flows, but they don't teach you or train you, or, you know, how to manage that, manage the work, like, you know, ebb and flow.
So to counter that, Holly gets no training, like nothing. They have nothing. You are a designer until you are a design manager, and then you're a design manager until you're a design director, and all that is training you for the next position is OJT. But there's no pipeline. There's no, hey, you're going to go to a leader's course for this, and this. And so your best chance of getting the next position is to get promoted or be at that level, and then interview with another company, get that next bump up. Like, hey, I was a design manager for 10 years, or 5 years, whatever the case is. I'm applying for that director position. And so that's the way a lot of people change titles. And then you just kind of ping pong back and forth companies, or unless one's going to send you up the ladder, but you don't get shit for understanding how to lead people, lead humans into making shit happen, other than what you learned through just doing it
or something. Yeah,
which is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Like, the Navy's got a lot more resources than we did when we were coming up and everything, and that's great. You know, Military Family Services Center and all that stuff. But I think I think just people are people.
Sure.
Like, if you're a shitty fucking person, you're going to be a shitty fucking person, and you're going to be a shitty fucking leader.
Totally. I mean, obviously, there's so many factors that go into it, like where you grew up, what your parents were like, how your friend circle acts. I mean, you have those people who are very selfish and just worried about making the next rank, then the next rung in the ladder, because that's what they've been told is what you seek, and they don't necessarily understand that is supposed to be a reward for doing a good job, and your reward is that you get to manage all these people and grow them.
Yeah.
And grow the business and grow the money and grow all of that. And they just look at it as, nope, society says I need that. That's what I need so that I can walk around, pound my chest, say I'm in charge. And everybody goes, cool. And the funny thing is, when you sit around and you tell people all that stuff, people are like, I don't care. I don't care that you're in charge of 200 people, 300 people. I mean, like, cool for 5 seconds, right? Oh, wow, that dude's the CEO, blah, blah, blah. That's cool. Next, what can you do for me?
Yeah.
Do you see that a lot in the civilian sector?
Well, I'd like to think that it's more of a emotional intelligence sort of thing, where they don't, like, the leaders that I've seen. I don't want to. I mean, I've only got 2 jobs, so see if I start mentioning things.
Well, there's 2 more jobs than I've seen.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
No, definitely don't incriminate yourself.
But they're not. I've not seen impressive leaders. If that's what you mean.
There's
sad. There's a few. Don't get me wrong, right? And like, that kind of goes back to the emotional intelligence thing I was going to say. Is they can read people, right? And I think that's actually something that we all have, probably based on that thing that you're saying, Don, where you're around a lot of people. We're around a lot of people from different backgrounds. And some of them good, some of them bad, and they all have these things they come at you with, and it helps you understand people, right? Emotional intelligence, and how. And then at that point, once you can kind of understand people, you can get them to do what you need them to do, or help them in ways that they need help, that sort of thing. So I think there's a big thing there with the military and seeing all those different aspects of people.
Yeah, we have this really unique opportunity in where asking people about their personal lives in the military is considered leadership. How are you, what are your finances like? What's your home life? Are your
How's
kids
your marriage doing?
How's your marriage?
Yeah.
All of these things. And that helps you understand the person, which gives you the opportunity to lead them on a personalized basis. And when I ask Holly if she does those things, or if she talks to them about, the kids and all stuff, she's like, you can't do that shit. Are you kidding me? HR would come down with a vengeance if I was like, well, blah, blah, blah. How was your home life this week?
That's illegal?
I don't think it's illegal, but it's kind of one of those like business rules rather than policy. I work here. You don't own my life. That's none of your business. So
it's an interesting concept.
But if you're genuine about it, I mean, like,
sure. But it's. I don't think the problem is those people that you don't have the problem with. It's those people that you're gonna have a problem with no matter what. Those couple bad apples that are gonna be in and just cause problems and blah blah blah. Then it comes time to fire them. And they're like, well, you're just firing me because I told you that I had a shitty home life. You're like, what?
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. I mean, one of the eye-opener things, like when I left the program for that one tour out in Hawaii, like I had kids, like 3rd classes, 2nd classes, young kids, and I called everybody that first name, right? Because that's what we do. Because you're a human being, You're a human being, right? You're a human being. And I had like third classes tell me, like, no, I'm petty officer so-and-so. And I didn't know how to handle it. I was like, well, fuck.
So I think there are times when that's appropriate and times where it's not.
Yeah, there's a time and a place for sure.
No. I don't necessarily mean like, okay, yes, in this setting, call me this. In that setting, call me that. We in NSW say this because, or we say that it's okay to call me by my first name because this isn't what matters. If you are a piece of shit at work, if you can't do your job, that's the stuff I care about. I don't care about you calling me my rank. I care about you doing your job.
Doing your job, yep.
And so when you talk about how some chiefs or some officers out there are like, how dare you call me by my actual name? That's like, you don't understand what's important.
Yeah.
What you're leading isn't what you should be leading.
It's like haircuts.
How so?
If my hair's long, I'm obviously shitty at my job.
Oh yeah. Yeah, totally. And obviously this is, a lot of those policies are this big overarching policy because of all the walks of life that are in the military and how benign some of the jobs are and how those professionals are employed. And so, hey, look, man, I need you to turn this wrench every hour. 1/4 turn, nothing more, nothing less. Literally don't do anything else. And then after that
sounds awesome.
After that, go upstairs and stand watch for 5 hours. That's basically what the Navy's paying you for. Those guys, they're like, we have to have rank structure. You have to call me by this because otherwise,
chaos.
Somehow that turns to chaos. Again, where we're at, it doesn't matter because I know if you're not doing your job, I can just kick you out. And you go back to that 1/4 turn on the wrench.
Well, that goes a lot back to what Jocko talks a lot about in his podcast, right? Is discipline. And I forgot the name of the book, but there was a Colonel Colonel Hackworth out in Vietnam. He was told to take command of this unit out there, and the guys were just the weapons were dirty. They were just doing drugs, and it was all just a shit show. And he goes in there and he starts with the little things like clean your weapons, wear a uniform properly.
Shine your boots.
Yeah, shine your boots. Like, hey, we're forward. Like, I go back and forth on it. Like, for me, maybe I'm a shitty leader and I just stopped caring a long time ago. But it goes back to what you were saying. Hey, do your job. Like, I honestly don't care what you look like, but if you're the best comms guy, I trust you. If you're the best weps, I trust you. I don't know. Maybe that's the wrong approach, but
no. I don't think it's the wrong approach, but I think there are two approaches. There's the cause and effect. If I get you to show up and clean your weapon, clean your boots, and that's exactly what Colonel Hackworth was trying to do is, hey, if you show up and you do these little things, it will translate into the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And if you don't do those or you don't have any routine at all in your life, you basically just wake up every day and go, we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, I think it goes to like if you start doing those little things, you start getting some of the buy-in, and then once you have the buy-in, you can do some of those more advanced things or, the more challenging
it's
aspects
scalable.
of it. Yeah.
And part of that is look good, feel good, do good.
And
it's that
definitely
like mentality thing, right?
Definitely.
We got these little things taken care of. Now we're going to move on to bigger things, right?
And I do think that there are some things where if we did employ some of those smaller things, uniform, shaving, haircuts, that a lot of other things would clean up. But again, what is it worth? Is it worth building this kind of hate and discontent and detachment from this so that you can get guys to do haircuts or do a little bit better? Or can you approach these guys from a different angle on a different subject and get them the same results or more?
Well, it depends on the problem, right? If it's a discipline problem, then it probably is those we need the haircuts to come back, right? Because they're just total chaos, and you got to bring back the structure. But if it's I'm not very good at my job, right? That's a different story. So you don't need to really worry about the haircut. You need to worry about training for the job and, going through that whole motion.
I think that's a good way to put it. I mean, I guess you're right. It's about prioritization. Like, one of the things I always feel really bad about, and I still think about it for whatever fucking reason. And I remember when Nick was the command SEA, and he was bitching about one of our guys' haircuts. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And I told him, hey, man, go get a haircut, right? Because I don't want to fucking listen to it.
It's not worth it. It's not worth the fight. If somebody's bringing it up, it's a problem. So just stop it so that we can move on to the thing that actually matters.
Focus on the things that are important, right? But I was weak, and I was just, I'm the SEA, and tell him to go get a haircut. He gets a haircut, shows up the next day, and literally did not look like he got a haircut. He had I don't know. He went home or in his truck, because I think he was living in his truck at that time, and just barely trimmed it.
Yeah.
And I was and I just lost it, because the command SEA told me again the next day, hey, man, I told you to do that. I'm like, I've got more important things to do, and I didn't control the situation. I didn't control my emotions, and I always apologize every time I see, every time I see him. I always apologize. Hey, dude, I'm sorry. It's
yeah, well,
it's kind of on him, right? Though, if you ask him to get a haircut and he just half-asses it, that's the lack of respect towards you, right? If it got to a point where you needed to ask him to do that, he probably should have took it on board.
So we're all responsible, but other people help us to be accountable.
Yeah. Right? If you want to plug all of Jocko's podcast and mentality and the way he goes, ultimately it's your fault, because you didn't set the conditions for when you tell somebody that it's because of some other thing. And you should just do it. If I tell you to get a haircut, it's not because I want you to get a haircut. It's because I'm trying to make these other effects, and you should just do it. You should have that trust in me that that's not the case.
I can't believe we're talking about fucking haircuts. I brought it up, though, so sorry.
You have a very nice haircut, by the way.
That's all I got. Don't have anything else.
But back to the grit thing. It's really funny how kind of all of that applies. How all of that applies to executing everything that we're talking about, whether that's being in the military, walking up a mountain, or finding a job or surviving as a civilian. At the end of the day, I'm going to outwork you. I'm going to outthink you, whatever that means. And we have some very interesting ways of really getting to testing guys' mettle. The first time that I ever ran 7 miles was my first, I think, day at the command. And I showed up and we're going to do an island run. I was like, oh, that must be like a workout.
Sounds nice.
I was like, oh, that must be like a WOD.
Yogging.
Or something.
Soft J.
And I'm like, so what is this? And they're like, it's a run around the island. I'm like, the whole thing? Okay. And I'm like, I don't know if I could do it. They're like, you literally just don't stop. Left foot, right foot. It's the easiest thing that you could ever do.
It's pretty simple.
And so I was like, oh, of course I was terrified of getting fired every minute of being a new guy, even though it's incredibly hard to get fired. But that's
you don't know that at the time.
Yeah, you don't know that. And
we'll tell you that. But
what's even worse than getting fired is being labeled a turd. You don't want to be a turd, but that was kind of the first exposure to me of just be hard. Just you just left foot, right foot. It's not rocket science. Just keep going. And then, further down the road, I'm known for being a bad runner. And so I'm like, fuck you guys. I'm going to run a marathon.
Yeah. Super smart.
Terrible idea. But my mentality behind that was left foot, right foot. I could do it. Like that, I'm going to prove all of you wrong. And all I have to do is left foot, right foot for 26.2
Yeah, but I think it goes back to not the 7 mile run, specifically, but it goes back to what you were saying earlier. It's shared suffering, right?
I was pretty alone in that endeavor. Luckily,
trust me, there were other people that were suffering more than you.
I tried to get people to join in that shared suffering, and it was met with a very quick and decisive no.
And I think that's because a lot of us have done that marathon or marathons in the past and know how miserable it is.
Yeah. Luckily, I had Jimmy who said no to the marathon, but basically ran half of it with me as a.
Were you even registered? You just showed up?
No, just a spectator.
And just went under the ropes and
Yeah. And it happened. It was funny because it happened in all of the worst spots. So I remember the first time that I walked was at mile 12, and we come up around the corner.
Is this the Rock and Roll?
Yeah, the Rock and Roll in San Diego.
Oh man!
And so I come up around the corner, and I get maybe 6 paces into a walk, and one of our buddies, Lolo, rolls up on a bike. It's like, "Hey, Don." Like, oh,
he was on a bike.
Damn it. He's like, "I just came to cheer you on, man." And I'm like, but now I have to run again. That break wasn't nearly what I thought it was going to be. So I'm like, okay, cool. And then the next point where I was thinking about walking, I turn the corner and Jimmy's there like, "Hey, buddy, let's go." And of course, they're on that fresh, I just showed up. I can run a 6-minute pace, no problem. They're like running next to me.
That's
like,
Jimmy.
Why are you going so slow?
Fucking workhorse. They put that in hill at mile 12 or 14 or whatever it is, the one on 163.
Yeah, 163.
Yeah. Oh my God. You get there and you're just like, you guys are fucking retarded.
Yeah. Pete, I think you have a lot to say on the grit aspect, and I think that's really driven a lot of your decisions.
I gotta go.
All right, let's take a break real quick.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think I really have a unique perspective on grit, but for me, it means just grinding it out every day, doing hard things, to exercise that sort of part of your life.
I think when I mean unique perspective on grit, it's more about the way that you value grit.
Yeah, I think that stems from some introspection, thinking about things in my personal life or insecurities that I feel that I have and don't want to express to necessarily everybody else. And so I look to do challenging things, to just prove to myself that I can do them, to exercise the ability to not quit when things get challenging. And then also just seeing your friends suffer next to you is the greatest, I think, reward.
Super enjoyable.
Yeah. And so, just seeking out those, challenging efforts, doing the workouts together, the shared suffering there, and just not quitting day in and day out it's awesome.
Yeah. What sort of value do you get from accomplishing something that is just absolutely miserable? And when I'm talking about miserable, it's not your CrossFit WOD. It's not doing Fran twice in a row, whatever the case is. I'm talking about the 55-mile rucks through Montana, or climbing 2 14,000-foot mountains in a week, or things like that. That go just beyond that initial push into this sucks, into
the unknown.
Well, into I am beyond miserable.
Yeah, I
am beyond anything other than just shut up and walk.
Well, I think background with John Chad is he's the type of guy that will go and go and go, and he might not be the first one, but by the time he gets there and he's done, he's thrown up. Yeah, he's probably thrown up more than any person I've ever known after a workout.
Just for the listeners' understanding, John Chad is what we call Pete.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. I mean, so in the moment, it's like the worst thing that you're doing. You can't think of anything other than just how much it sucks. And, you'd rather be doing anything other than just putting that one foot in front of the other. But then once it's done and over, you look back on it and it never seems as bad as it was in the moment. You know, I can remember I stared at the back of Don's feet for 3 days straight, just hiking through the mountains, 55 miles, and it was absolutely miserable. And then we finished up riding back in the car, and we were all exhausted, but smiles on everybody's faces, thinking back to all those miserable times where we made a bunch of bad decisions. And, you know, you look back joyfully at how miserable it was.
So I think going maybe one layer deeper than that, those hikes are for me, or what those challenges are for me, is first of all, the fact that you go to me into it. Hey, we're going to do this. You want to do it? And the only response that I have to something like that, and that goes amongst the group, is, yeah, of course. Do I want to do it? No. I absolutely don't want to do it.
I just want to puss out.
But you're going to do it, so therefore I have to do it. And, you know, that goes to the brotherhood bond and that sort of stuff. But then it's the commitment that I made to you that we're going to do this together no matter what. You may be faster, I may be faster, or stronger in certain aspects, whatever the case is, but we're going to finish this together. And I think we actually quit that hike maybe 6 times.
Yeah. That was a rough one. And I just kind of like overall in general, a lot of times it's just doing them and then finishing them just to prove to yourself that you can do it. Right. And so like, if you do the hard thing and you finish it and prove to yourself that you can do it, then when you get into another hard, challenging situation, you just think back to, well, I did that hard thing back then. I can finish this hard thing now. It's no different. Like you said earlier, just one foot in front of the other, keep going, put your head down. And then at the end of it, like, you got all those awesome memories to look back on.
So I think that's kind of what I want to capture, especially on the topic of grit, because it's not about the 55-mile hike or, you know, climbing mountains or whatever the case is. It is not about that at all. It's about putting yourself in these very dramatic situations and testing your mental fortitude to overcome these things and seeing at what point you're going to say enough's enough and stop doing it.
Yeah.
And the accountability piece there that we have is, hey man, we're doing it together. I got a little bit more left in me.
Yeah.
Do you? Cool. Because if I was by myself, I would have stopped.
Yeah. I mean,
I just literally would not have continued. And what was unique about that particular hike is you actually hike to an exit point and you can stop there and get your car and drive away. But the decision to go back and then you have to finish because there's no other choice, that's a commitment that you make. And then going beyond that, applying that to another situation, whether that's combat, whether that's dealing with your marriage, dealing with friendship, all of those things, and you go, this may be a point where I just have to left foot, right foot.
Yeah, and I think you hit it on the head with the personal responsibility and accountability there, like having that person there with you, knowing if you quit, you're letting them down, or you know, something like that. That makes it a little easier, but it's still, you know, just the exercising the grit and
quitting is contagious.
Yeah,
it is. It absolutely is, and obviously, you know, the first podcast that I had for Lead and Lace was about quitting. And for me, that was such a hard thing to accept. I've always been brought up, hey, you started it, you have to finish it, period. Whether that was sports, whether that was a club, whatever the case was. And so reaching that point, or being mature enough to say, okay, it's not about quitting this thing. It's about understanding what this is going to take out of my time, out of my ability to spend time with my kids and all those things. And I value this other thing more. And so I was afraid that decision to quit was going to lead to me making it easier to quit
other things. Well, I don't know. Like, we talked about this earlier. Like, from the very first day, we're taught, hey, learn from your failures. You're not learning if you're not failing. Don't be afraid to fail because you'll learn from it and be stronger on the other side. And it goes back to the marriage thing too. I think there comes a point for some people in certain situations, whatever it may be for that person, to say, you know what? I've given it so much for so long. It's literally going to kill me if I don't stop.
Yeah.
And there's, I think, maybe not superficial, but a false sense of nobility to do something until it kills you before you make a decision to realize what your limits are in a given situation, whether it's combat, whether it's marriage, whether it's relationships, your kids, whatever it may be. And I don't know, there's two sides to that, right?
Sure. And that's where I think a lot of us, and not just us specifically, or our group of friends, confuse grit with being responsible in your choice. Because our nature is to grind it out. And quitting is such an absolute, it's an automatic failure if you quit. And that's the way we think about it in our minds. And so we put ourselves in a lot of these toxic situations, whether that's a relationship, whether that's friends or decisions, dipping, smoking, drinking, fighting, all of those things. And we say, well, I can't necessarily quit because that's a failure, but I do need to distance myself from these things. And it doesn't always have to be that negative.
The dipping makes me laugh. Like, I don't want to quit something that's going to fucking kill me.
Yeah. Yeah. And how many times do you quit quitting?
Quitter.
Jimmy, you went through something that was pretty unique, and I think you got this from somebody in your hometown, where you ran a mile a day every day for a year. I think a year and a half, right?
Yeah, it was over a year and a half.
Was it just 1 mile?
Well, that's all you have to do is at least 1 mile.
You went further on some occasions.
Yeah, of course. Okay. Yeah. And if we were doing it at work, that of course counts, right? It's not like outside of your normal. A mile a day, every day. And my English teacher, Jim the Pig from Ferndale High School, actually today has reached his 50-year mark of running a mile a day.
That's insane.
Yeah, so he, was very influential in that means, and his son went through a bout of. He was another wrestler that was actually. He used to film me when I wrestled at Ferndale, and he ended up getting hurt and got hooked on some. I can't remember what it is.
Opioids.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So he got hooked on opioids, and that was one of the things that got him out of it was running every day, just like his old man. And so I started doing that and kind of representing him and Jim, and we were working out anyway, so it just kind of made sense, man. Might as well get some credit, right? So I did it for at least a year, and then after that, it's kind of addictive. Like, you just want to keep going and keep going and keep going. And the reason I quit was I jacked my ankle up really good, and it wasn't healing. So it's like, well, at some point I really got to kind of stop. So one day I just went to the stop sign, and I was like, finished my mile. I was like, well, this is it, man. This is the day. I'm going to stop today.
Yeah.
And I didn't run the next day, and it's like, oh, it's over. It's kind of it's a weird feeling, like, because you did it for so long, and you're like, oh man, should I have kept going or should I have not? But I think it was the right decision.
That's recognizing your limits, man. I mean,
yeah.
Well, so not necessarily focusing on the quitting part. As you're going through that, talk about what kind of grit it took for you to get through that.
Yeah. So. Maybe people don't realize, how they live their life. But if you go on vacation, you still got to run a mile. Or if you go like out in the woods, I may have hiked all day, but that doesn't count. So I got to go run.
or you've been on a plane all day and you land at like 11 at night.
Exactly. Right. So you have, and I mean, we had some pretty big commitments at that time, and we're traveling the country and doing this and that. And so to get that commitment out of the way, that thing out of the way was, it requires a lot of like planning or discipline and
mental toughness,
whatever you want to call it. But yeah, it was like, it's very inconvenient, so to speak. And that's part of what grit is, right? You're not comfortable with the situation. It's like, it's uncomfortable.
Well, it's being comfortable, right? Being uncomfortable.
So,
right. Perfect.
What were some of the takeaways you learned about yourself through grinding that stuff out? I think one, like, just to kind of like point you in the direction of where I want more information on.
Yeah.
Is I remember several times where we're day drinking.
Yeah.
Right. And you're like, well, I got to hit my mile.
Yep.
And then kind of when you do that the first time, you're like, oh, that wasn't that bad.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of found a lot of value in understanding what normally is like okay, I'll do it tomorrow, and doing it today.
Yeah. Yeah. Getting it out of the way, you mean? Like.
Well, I mean, just making the choice of prioritizing that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, that's actually, and I guess we do that to some respects with a lot of things. Like we were talking about a degree, too. That's a priority, right? It's like you have to prioritize your family or the degree. And a mile is not that big a deal, right? It's like 8 minutes, if you're running a moderate pace.
For some, it's 10.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's not like but if I'm out there, if I really want to get it done, I'm going to, 6 minutes, I'm done, right? That's out of a 24-hour day. So that's kind of the way I thought about it, is like, oh, okay, it's 8 minutes.
When you
kind of break it down into this small thing, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to get at. It's like when you think about it, you're like a mile every day, you're like, oh, man, that's, I got to do this every day. But you're like, well, if I just 10 minutes out of the day, it's not very long, just get it done. And then.
I think that I would like to hear more from you guys how you got grit, like, because I know where I got it. I was a small kid, like I was saying before, and to wrestle you had to be 101 pounds. I weighed 82 pounds, so I got my butt kicked for 2 years straight. Like, I mean, not even a win my first year. Well, maybe a couple wins, right? But I was getting hammered by guys that were a lot heavier than me for a good year and a half, 2 years, and then finally I just kind of hit this. I was, I got my weight down. I got dispersion. I started getting good. Technique was better. And then I started getting on these wins, right? But
what kept you showing up to getting your butt kicked? Because I think that's the grit piece, right?
Well, the first year I wrestled, I was pretty good at it. Like I was really good at it, right? So that just kind of fired me up to get better. And then buddies on the team, right, really wanted me to be a part of the team. I filled the weight slot, right? So part of that is, again, other people helping you be accountable and cheering you on to some extent, right? Because they understood what I was up against. I used to have to gain weight to wrestle, so they would help me gain weight to wrestle. Like, we come up with ideas. Like I had these padlocks and this. We don't have to get into that, but
yeah, for me, I believe that I was tricked into having grit.
Yeah,
in the sense that I love sports.
Yeah,
and I played a lot of sports, and so it was showing up to those practices and being motivated by that. That was kind of what got the work ethic and grinding things out to, it was a personal fulfillment for me to be on the team and be recognized as good at what I do and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But that is what made me harder, at other things.
Yeah.
But when I look at my influences and kind of what made me start even down that path, my dad works his ass off and has the same job for 35 years, whatever the case is. And so looking at him, he couldn't wait to go to my practices. He was at my assistant coach on every sport, no matter what he knew about it. And he's the guy who's an hour early to everything. So we would show up to practice an hour early. Like literally nobody's there. Cones aren't set up. Coaches aren't there, whatever. And so he would just go play catch with me for an hour before. And would work on technique and we'd work on form, and then we'd talk about how to, not necessarily how to play, but we would talk about the process of what's going on. And then I found a lot of value in going to practice. Part of it was spending time with my dad, but I just loved to play. So I never missed a practice, not one single practice in anything that I did ever.
Yeah.
Because I just thought that was so important.
Oh, absolutely. And it helps with the technique and all that. But I think where the grit comes in, like with the people that you're with, they help hold you accountable, right? But I didn't offer anything to the team, being that I was losing matches and, getting my butt kicked. But there's those little things that actually did help the team. I didn't realize it until we started getting into it. Like if you don't get pinned, that helps the team. So just don't get pinned, right?
Yeah.
So you got to start somewhere, right? Again, it goes back to the small things, right? Just then you don't get pinned. It's like, okay, now score some points, So
yeah, so I think you're kind of on the same vein as I, where you're kind of tricked into having grit because you're buying into this mechanism, right? You're buying into the team or getting good at this sport or showing up to get better at something.
But do you think some of that is inherent in your personality, though? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so.
I think that's nature
versus nurture, right? Yeah.
Right? Because kids' personalities, and we're all parents, right? Kids' personalities are inherent. You can teach them right and wrong, but, I think a lot of that is inherent in our personalities.
I would almost agree with that based on what I saw at the little dual meet last week. Is that the kids, some of the kids that I was, teaching moves to and all that were very passive, and, there wasn't a whole lot of I didn't think there was a lot of fight there, right? Because it's not a nice sport, right? You got to be aggressive. And when I actually saw one of these girls wrestle another girl, not a teammate, I was amazed. I was like, wow, where did this come from? I didn't see it for the last 2 weeks. And all of a sudden, she's just this animal. I couldn't.
Yeah, all it takes is somebody to show you what grit and determination looks like.
Yeah,
and they either cling to it, or they're like, "Oh no, that's not for me."
Well, yeah, and that goes to tapping into those influences. For me, one of those influences was my dad, and then another was my grandparents, and kind of the surrounding that you're involved with, and watching them, and. You look at your kids and they're watching you, and they're watching, hey, how do I act? Yeah. How am I supposed to do things? And so
exactly.
I'm one of those guys who is now an hour early to everything, or at least a half hour early. And part of that was because when I was little, I looked at my dad for how to act, and that's what that was the result.
Yeah.
I think you have a little bit of grit. I think everyone has some sort of grit and varying levels of you're born with it, but it's something that can be learned, taught, exercised, and you can gain more of it by doing more things that cause you to have grit. I don't think I developed any grit when I was growing up. Very independent, did my own thing, didn't really challenge myself. I don't think I really started to exercise or learn grit until joining this community and being around all these guys and just not wanting to quit and looking like that, the weak link or any of that sort of stuff. And so over the years, the past decade or so of just not quitting, started to build up more grit. And I don't know, I think it's something I've learned in my adulthood rather than something I've grown up with.
Yeah, I'm the same way. After high school, I wasn't doing shit. I was skateboarding and I'm going to get sponsored and I'm going to be a pro skateboarder, and wasn't doing anything to chase that dream down. And then, joined the Navy by chance, and joined the Navy because my dad asked me this all the time. He's like, why didn't you join that? Because my dad was a command sergeant major, 27 years. And he always tells me the story well, you said you didn't want to do push-ups, so you joined the Navy. And then here
how right he was.
Yeah.
As a cryptologist, for us, this community, this program is probably the hardest thing you can do, at least in our respective ratings. And I'm the same way, Pete. You know, I didn't learn determination or perseverance until I was an adult, and I was surrounded by people who really opened the door to tell me, okay, hey, this is what this looks like. This is what grit and determination and not quitting looks like.
You just emulate the values of those around you. And so, you know, seeing everybody else have that sort of grit, you want to be like them, and, you know, you want to.
Well, I think for me, like, you know, I did some marriage counseling a while ago, and there's this book called Love and Respect, right? And it talks about the difference between what a woman needs and what a dude needs. And you know, a man needs respect. He needs respect from his wife. He needs respect from his kids. He needs respect from his peers. And, you know, some of us have a hard problem showing affection and being like that because that's not my love language or whatever, right?
Right.
And so, you know, for us coming in this community, being surrounded by these guys and wanting to be respected and wanting to be put in difficult situations or wanting to be given those responsibilities that we're, you know, we want or desire positions in a platoon or something like that, right? That's what, you know, for me, that's what I wanted. I wanted to be respected. I wanted to do the hardest things I could possibly do, you know, in this program, to be respected. As shallow as that kind of sounds saying out loud.
No. I mean, ultimately, that's what it all comes back to. Like I said, whether you're that 7-year-old standing on the soccer field with your dad or you're in this community, because sure, I had grit in sports, but it was definitely showing up here and then looking at all of you guys and being like, well, I'm not going to be the guy that quits.
Carl was the first guy that, like, because I'd known him. He signed my first eval in the Navy. And, you know, the way I came into the program, it was during the very start of Iraq in March of 2003. And he was walking out of the Bahrain exchange and I was walking in. And we hadn't seen each other for, like, maybe 5-6 years or something like that. And he turned around. We went in for like a shake at the old exchange, and he was telling me about this program. And he was like, "Hey, you know, start working out. Put in your package to go to, you know, SWIC and everything," because all of our guys were going through SWIC at the time. I was like, "Oh, that sounds cool." Like, never thought about that, and I didn't even know what a SEAL was. Like,
sure,
didn't even know what that was. And but I love Carl, and he was the one that really showed me, like, hey, this is what.
Yeah, well, he's a tough guy to follow. I mean, he's the guy who's never tired, no distance is too far, nothing is too hard, and why are you complaining? And, you know,
he's got a smile on his face the entire time.
He's got a smile on his face the whole time, and he's, what, 43 now?
No, is he 40? He's younger than me?
Okay, whatever.
He's 45. I think he's a year older than me.
Yeah, so he's right in that window of, you're like, I'm 32.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a long way to go.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'd like to know where he really thinks he got his grit. You know what I mean?
That would actually be a really interesting conversation to, like, kind of talk to Carl about. Like, we need to get him on.
But you, I think really all of us have, well, at least Pete and Gideon, you have a military relative, right? So you, I think, may have seen some of that from them. I mean,
yeah,
my grandfather was military, but he had Parkinson's, so he fought.
For me, growing up, I didn't give a shit.
Yeah.
I didn't care what he did. I didn't understand Vietnam. I didn't understand the Gulf War. Like, I didn't. I was a shit bag.
Well,
kid.
yeah, but you had to have observed. You know what I mean? Like, I observed my grandfather.
Sometimes
it's my mother,
it's
being a single mom.
It's not a conscious decision of where maybe you're evaluating what's going on, but you were at least present with other
and being
people.
Exposed.
Yeah. And I think that's part of it. And another thing on the topic, and probably to kind of wrap this up, is I think a lot of people who really have grit don't really think they do, because you're just doing what you do.
No.
You know, I don't think any one of us wake up in the morning like, I got grit. I got grit, kid.
Look at that guy.
But the way that comes out in the form of, well, you're going to quit on that run? And you're like, no. What? Like, why would I ever do that?
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense to me. Or are you going to complete that task? Are you going to, shovel that hay or, whatever the case is. And it's just the fact that stopping in the middle of that or not completing it or not following through with your word, all of those things are not a thought. Like it's not even on the register of possibilities. And so when you're faced a multiple choice question, it's not in there. And so that I think is really the true grit piece. And we're a little bit introspective in the way that we analyze the process and
self-evaluate
all the time. And then we're around a part in which we are evaluating people. And so that we've identified grit as something that we value. And so now we all look at each other and say, how much grit do you have? And blah, blah, blah. And that's why it's a thing. But if you ask that farmer who wakes up day in, day out for 60 years, milking his cows or, doing whatever he's got to do that dude's got more grit than anybody. And that dude never once wakes up and goes, oh, I'm hard.
Yeah.
It's just life for him, right? That's just Tuesday.
Exactly.
Well, it's like the POWs. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was like, hey, this is life or death. And I'm going to do what I do on a daily basis to get through this. I don't know when this is going to end. And it's not only until you're out of that situation do you look back and say, I got through it, right?
Definitely. Well, I just wanted to close this out with a thank you to you guys. I really appreciate your time. I love you guys, and I can't wait for you guys to be on the next podcast.
I fucking love the shit out of you guys.
Thanks for having us on, man.
Definitely.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, closing note. If you want to check out an awesome bladesmith, somebody to get you a really good knife, one of our good friends who I hope to have on the podcast soon is Bad Omen Knives.
I was just at his house.
Yeah, did you get to see any of his?
Oh yeah, so I saw the knife he made for Carl. One of the things that really struck me, like when I went in the garage and he handed me a knife, was the way it felt. Like that's how a knife should feel. The weight of it, the balance of it. And I don't know a shitload about knives, but man, that fucking thing felt good.
I totally agree. I've had a couple of his prototypes as he was coming up, and some of them are and some of them were, hey man, you're on the right track. But when he built me that custom chef knife, when it arrived, I was almost kind of like, oh shit!
Did you cry?
This is too
nice.
This is too nice to be in
when
my
I
kitchen.
saw that one, I was like, that's what I want.
Yeah.
I want a fucking kitchen knife.
Yeah. So, Bad Omen Knives. You can check them out on Instagram at Bad Omen Knives or at Bad Omen. Really good dude. Custom blades, hunter knife. I'm having him work on a fish fillet knife for a gift, and really good dude. Thanks for joining us. Have a good night.